All right. Welcome to the Federal Benefits Show here at FEBA. My name is Alex Wellings. I'm your host. Today we're joined with Mr. Johnny Rosier. 45 years experience in the financial world, helping state and federal government employees with their retirement questions and needs. We're honored to have him on the show. We've had him on a few times before, and he does all kinds of speaking engagements for FEBA across the country. We want to thank him for showing Mr. Johnny Rosier. Johnny, thanks for joining us on the show today. We're talking spousal benefit or the spousal benefit options with regards to the FERS pension. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. I'm glad to be here. Honored to be here. Hopefully I can be educational and beneficial and productive for the listeners out there.
I'm sure that won't be any problem at all. And today we're talking about spousal benefit with regards to the pensions out there, the FERS Annuity or even the SERS. I guess we can get into spousal benefit on the SERS side of things if you'd like to, but particularly with regards to the FERS pension. Now, this is one, I guess I understand this is one of the main questions that you get out there helping federal employees over the last few years.
Yes, it is. When they get ready to retire, within 5 to 6 years, we start getting those type questions, and I find that just a ton of FERS federal employees, especially on the FERS side, they really don't understand how to choose those options and the consequences of choosing those options. And one of the things I tell them, you got to make sure this is chosen correctly because it is an irreversible decision. There are not that many decisions in life that we all make that we at least can't change our mind, but this is one of those that you cannot. So once you've made that selection, you're stuck with it, whether it was the right decision or not. So you cannot undo it. So it is real important that federal employees totally understand it and that they make the right choice that makes the most sense for them. And they don't really realize how costly some of those decisions are over time.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's obviously a heavily weighted decision, being that you can make it once. Very few things in this world that you only get to make a decision on one time. But what do federal employees need to keep in mind? Like, what's causing all the confusion out there? Or I guess a lot of it's just lack of information. But what is it that you tell federal employees when you're sitting down with them that they need to consider prior to making a decision?
Well, certainly it's lack of information, and it, the early part of their career, most people are making a living and raising a family, so retirement's not close enough in sight for them to make that decision, and then it's procrastination, and quite honestly, I find that a lot of federal employees make their decision on things like survivor benefit by just asking a coworker that's probably already retired, and they don't realize that coworker probably asked another coworker, and so it goes on down the line. But the first thing I make sure they understand, this will be an irreversible decision. FERS employees have 3 options. They have what's called a 50% option, which allows them to get a reduced retirement on their FERS annuity by 10%. So if their check's supposed to be $2,000 a month, it's reduced by $200 a month. And if they die, their surviving spouse keeps getting half of the $2,000 until their death. And then and that's the defaulted answer by the federal government.
Oh.
And if there happens to be anybody listening that is married to a state employee in the state they live in or a public educator, they have options similar, but the defaulted answer for federal employees is you will take the 50% option. And if you want one of the other options, which is a 25% option, and that allows you to get a little bit smaller check, a little bit larger check, so your $2,000 would only be reduced by 5% in that example, or $100. But if the retired federal employee dies first, their spouse keeps getting 25% of their check until they pass away.
So $500.
And then obviously they have the maximum option. Yeah, they have the maximum option where if the employee dies, the spouse gets nothing. And I think what comes into play here is a lot of people don't want to go home and have a conversation with their spouse and say, hey, I wanted to let you know I filled out my retirement papers and we're getting so much a month, but if I die, you're not going to get anything. That's not a very, soothing conversation to have.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah. But if they've had that conversation 4 or 5 years ahead of time and they have planned properly, that may very well be the right decision, because giving up 10% of your pension, just so a surviving person may keep getting half of it, may not be a wise decision. Actually, for most people, by the time they reach age 80, 85, if they're both still alive, that option has cost them well over $80,000. That 10% adds up over time.
You're talking about the 50% survivor option. That's
the
what
50%
right?
survivor. Yeah, that 10% cost item may not look like but $200, but 200 times 12 times 20 to 30 years in retirement, that adds up to be some significant money.
Sure.
And then the spouse may die first, so you have that situation where that person may pass away first. A lot of them don't realize that is the defaulted answer.
Right.
And if they want one of the other decisions, if they want the 25% reduction or they want the no reduction, they don't realize that them and their spouse has to fill out paperwork and both get it notarized and get it back to HR. And if they don't do that, they will get the 50% option with the 10% reduction in their retirement. A quick example, I had a lady in a retirement seminar last year back in 2019, and she says, well, my spouse and I are legally married, but we don't live together. He may not sign this. And I said, well, then you're going to get the 50% option, because they were still legally married, but they hadn't lived together. They just had not ever went through the divorce process.
Wow.
So she is going to leave him half her retirement unless he agrees to fill out paperwork and get it notarized. So
wow.
it can cause some issues. Yeah.
So they end up. So you said that obviously that's the default option, and then there's the 25%. But you said something like there's other options out there. The other option is zero. So what ends up happening? How do you keep your spouse funded through past my death? Like how would I support my wife beyond the grave if I'm selecting the zero option?
Right. Okay. That's a great question. And that's probably one of the questions we get the most when we discuss this in a live seminar. And the answer is 2 words that listeners may want to write down, called pension maximization. That's a terminology in my world that the general public tends not to know about. Pension maximization. And what that means is, instead of taking one of those reduced options, maybe go out into the private industry. And there's even our federal software that we use to help people find out what their FERS benefits are and all that. It includes this software link as well, where we can do that math for them and see how much a private life insurance plan may cost, and compare that to that 10% reduction that you're going to give up. And there's several things. Let me back up for a minute. First of all, when you say surviving benefit or survivor benefit option, you're basically saying you just bought life insurance. That's what you're actually saying. You're giving up 10% of your check, which we'll call premium, and you're naming a beneficiary, which has to be your spouse.
Right.
And if you die, your spouse gets some money. Well, that sounds very much like life insurance. Okay, I'm giving up some money forever. I'm naming a beneficiary. The only problem is it has to be my spouse. And it can't be a second spouse if your first one dies, or if you do get divorced, you cannot change it to another spouse. That if that spouse dies first, you cannot change a beneficiary to anybody else. And the other problem with it, that surviving benefit option is taxable. So if you do pass away first and the survivor is getting half of that $2,000 example we use, that $1,000 a month, that $1,000 a month is fully taxable, and it counts towards that survivor's Social Security benefits to determine whether your Social Security benefits are taxable.
Wow.
And if they did go purchase a private life insurance plan somewhere, that would be literally income tax free, and it would not count towards Social Security benefit taxation. So a private plan is a good option in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's totally uninsurable, major health problems, they don't really have the option to go look in the private world. But someone in reasonable good health and 5 to 8 years out from retirement should definitely consider the private option, because even though you have to pay for it, would you rather pay for it while you're working and getting paid your regular salary, or would you rather retire and your retirement check will be half of what you were making when you were working, and then it's reduced another 10% because you didn't go out in the private world and take care of it. So
Sure.
it definitely makes sense in most cases. And so pension maximization is an important word. I love the software we have that does that for federal employees, because it really tells them to the penny how much in the private world they should go look at for that same benefit.
That's really interesting. I mean, like, honestly, whenever I hear you talk about that, the pension max strategy, it always just blows my mind. I mean, when you do think about the FERS annuity or surviving spouse benefit being a form of life insurance, it's just kind of a diminished form of it, right? Like, first off, you said the taxes. That's fantastic. You're going to save money from taxes if you were to buy life insurance in lieu of the survivor benefit option. And you're not limited to taking this money in the form of distributions. They're going to force the hand of an either in your example prior to, which was the $2,000 annuity payment, either the 50%, which would be the $1,000 to the spouse, or $500 in the 25% option. They're forced to those payment cycles now for the rest of their life, whereas the life insurance would pay out in a lump sum. Am I right on that? It'd pay out in a lump sum, a tax-free benefit that the beneficiary could then take and put into an account that could distribute like a pension, or they could put into an account that allows them some more access that would then they could take out, maybe pay for some of the funeral costs, or pay for some of the other maybe pay off some debts that might be lingering around, whatever it might be, pay off that house, whatever.
Yeah. Well, when people, I mean, this will sound corny or humorous, I guess, and I don't mean it that way per se, but when people die, they don't just go home and get in the chair and pass away. They typically left unpaid medical bills, bills for sitters, bills for wheelchair ramps. My home right now, we had some modifications made for my mother-in-law, who died literally before she came home from the hospital, so we never had to use those. But I have a wheelchair ramp at my house. Mm-hmm. I have, handicap-sized toilets. I've got walk-in showers for roll-in showers for handicap. We don't need them yet, thankfully, but they were built for an elderly relative that never lived to get to come home and see them. But those things I just mentioned, they're not covered by your health insurance. You can't send in a receipt for a wheelchair ramp and new toilets and new showers and things like that. Yeah. So when someone dies, just getting that half of that $2,000 a month sounds good, but that person may actually need $25,000 to $40,000 up front to cover some expenses that were left behind by that person. Just like you said, just funeral costs for nothing else, a headstone. But there's typically other lingering expenses that got left behind as well. And the other advantage to a private plan, Alex, is if the spouse does pass away first, the private plan can be canceled. If it builds cash accumulation, like some life insurance plans do, it can be cashed in and use those monies. You can make a loan against that policy and keep it, or you can change the beneficiary to your children or grandchildren or your next spouse if you happen to get remarried. So you have a lot of flexibility with a private plan. One of them is just dropping it and not having to pay for it anymore because your spouse died first. Right. And that's a lot of flexibility as well. And that's another real misconception that I find with federal employees is they don't realize that they cannot name anybody else as beneficiary of their FERS annuity if their spouse dies first. They don't realize they can't name their children or their grandchildren. Now, there are some exceptions for special needs children. There's some special wording for things like that. But I mean, the majority of the people, you can't name anybody else. If that spouse dies first, and then you pass away next, nobody's getting any money from your FERS annuity. It stops. And now, one thing before I forget that needs to be mentioned: if you do not take the 50% option or the 25% option, and I find this is overwhelmingly seems to be known by federal employees, is if you don't take one of those reduced options and you pass away first, your surviving spouse cannot stay on the health insurance, the federal health insurance. And that is a true statement. Okay.
Right.
And up until the Affordable Care Act, that certainly was a decision that need to be thought out. But since the Affordable Care Act, with no more pre-existing conditions, people, surviving spouses specifically, can get health insurance anywhere, anytime. If the federal retired employee dies, that is called a qualifying event. So that surviving spouse can go buy health insurance anywhere with no pre-existing clauses, no waiting periods, no hidden language. They can go get coverage anywhere. Now, it still may make sense to keep the 25% reduction if that spouse does have significant health problems and things like that. Some of the things that go into that decision when people ask me that is your age, the federal employee's age versus their spouse's age. The federal employee's health condition versus their surviving spouse. Their spouse's health condition. So if you got a 60-year-old female federal employee that happens to be married to a 54-year-old gentleman who's in very bad health, she probably does want to take one of those options with the federal government, because he's going to need that health insurance if she's not around. But if both of them are already 65 and eligible for Medicare and Medicare Part B and supplements, it may not make sense to give up 10% of your check just for that possibility of that happening, because health insurance is so readily available to all Americans today. So that really is no longer a viable argument, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, but anything like we're talking about, obviously, that we ever mention on the Federal Benefits Show, we're basically saying that none of these options are one size fits all for every federal employee. We're just saying that there are options out there for federal employees to take a look at, and sitting down with an FRC, you can see if any of these things make sense for you, because it doesn't make sense for everybody to just go out and buy life insurance outside, or it doesn't, just like it doesn't make sense for everybody to select the 50% survivor annuity. There can be better ways to allocate money or funds to put yourself in a better situation, or your spouse in a better situation throughout those 20, 30-year retirement years. Now, one thing that you mentioned there that I know that we get a lot of questions about here at FEBA is what happens now if my spouse dies first? What happens in the pension, and what would happen in, say, if I took an outside option like a life insurance or private life insurance plan, something like that?
Okay. Well, if you first of all, let me answer this way. If you do take the 50 or the 25% option through the federal government, through HR and OPM, if you take one of those options and the spouse dies first, you do get to move up to the higher number going forward. So, for example, in our $2,000 number, if you took the $1,800 a month, which is the 50% option, it costs you 10% of your paycheck.
Right.
And you're getting $1,800 a month, and your spouse dies 4 months down the road, then you do get to go to the $2,000 moving forward. Now, you don't get to recoup any of that money. Right. So if you both live till age 80, 20 years into retirement, you've given up $200 times 12 months times 20 years. But you do get to move back. And most state plans, to be honest with you, don't allow you to do that. Now, if you take the private plan like we're talking about and your spouse dies first, then like we said, then you need to get with whoever you purchased that private plan from and make some decisions. Do you have children and grandchildren you'd like to keep the plan and just name them as a beneficiary going forward, so at your death your grandkids would get the money, which is what I would do. I mean, I've got 8 grandkids, so I wouldn't drop a plan that I had 5 or 6 years. I would just keep it and probably name 8 children, grandchildren, and let them split the money. So a nice legacy for your grandkids. But you could cancel a plan, you could change a beneficiary, and keep moving with it. So those would be your options there. And I find that most people probably don't cancel them because they do have other people in their family, that they could would like to allocate money to at their death. But
and I know there's some other stuff too. Like they could start even. I mean, sometimes I see advisors sit down with folks and talking about overfunding those life insurance, like set up the life insurance policy to help with the spousal situation where you're helping your spouse postpartum. But then also going the extra mile and overfunding that life insurance, creating some cash value in it for tax-free retirement purposes, more income in retirement, right?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you another advantage of most private plans. Now, I won't say all private plans, but most quality insurance companies today, most large insurance companies, and those that's been around for a long time, private plans, most of them now include living benefits. Okay, so that person will just say was $200,000 private life insurance plan, and the spouse died first. Well, if it was only life insurance, the retired federal employee might want to drop it. But most plans include up to $200,000. The life insurance can be used for long-term care. It can be used for critical illness if someone has cancer or heart attack or stroke. And all of us know somebody that have those things, and we're all, as we say, we're going to go through the 3 phases: the go phase, the slow go phase, the no go phase. The no go phase, where you're taken care of until you pass away. I mean, my sister was in the no go phase for 12 years before she died. She was on home health, so $200,000 or $300,000 of tax free money that can be used for that. And changing subject just a second to make a point. A lot of people I hear say, well, I don't need long-term care. I'm going to use my TSP for that. And of course, they've already spent their TSP on travel in their mind. They've already spent it on, other things. So there's only so many times you can spend that TSP money in your head.
Yeah.
But TSP certainly can be used for long-term care. But let's just say long-term care costs you $6,000 a month. Well, then you're going to have to pull out about $8,000 a month from your TSP to cover that $6,000 monthly expense, because that is taxable money. Yep. So you're draining down your TSP a lot quicker, and you're making the taxation of your Social Security go. It may be the difference between your Social Security being taxable and not being taxable. So using 401k and TSP money to pay long-term care bills, I would say that would be a last resort. And a last resort would be because you didn't have a long-term care policy that paid tax-free benefits.
Right.
And quite honestly, in older ages, I'm seeing, and I'll be 66 soon, so I'm getting up there in what they call the older ages. But long-term care is a much more expensive item that's going to have to be paid by somebody or some entity, more so than $300,000 or $400,000, worth of $500,000 worth of life insurance benefits. So anyway, private plans, to summarize that, private plans typically do include living benefits, so that if that surviving spouse, if that spouse died first and the federal retiree is still there, they would want to keep that because now they're alone. Another thing I find with seminars and federal employees, they don't realize when their spouse dies, they move to a different tax bracket because they're now filing single instead of filing marriage. So that even raises that tax liability question again.
Sneaks up on a lot of folks.
Anyway, a private plan makes a lot of sense for most people. But again, like you stated, That's why we want to do a federal benefit analysis for each federal employee. If everybody had the same problem and the same solution, it would be real easy just to send out a flyer to all 20-something million federal employees and say, here's the answer. But, all 22 million each have their own individual story, their own individual financial circumstances, and that's what that analysis helps do is personalize it to their situation.
It sure does. That's probably all we have as far as time goes for today on the subject. We covered a lot about spousal benefits. I know there's probably a ton more questions out there for federal employees about the subject matter, and we're here to answer them. That's what we're here for, these federal benefit analysis. This is what FEBA's been doing across the country for years now. Johnny at the helm of that for much of it. Johnny, how do the listeners, the watchers, the viewers get in touch with you if they have questions? I know you have some various points of contact that you can pass along to these people. Okay.
Well, email's probably the easiest for most people, and my email is my name, Johnny Rosier at me.com. That's JOHNNYROSIER at me.com, Johnny Rosier at me.com. Our toll-free number is 866-419-2263. And if they'll hit option 1, it'll swing right over to my cell phone, and that call will come directly to me. So 866-419-2263, option 1, and that'll come directly to me, and I can speak with whoever has questions and help direct them to getting a pension maximization analysis done and a full-blown federal benefit analysis if that's what they would like as well.
Well, perfect. Johnny, I do want to thank you again for joining us today, talking a little bit about spousal benefit options with our federal employee friends out there. Again, all that contact information will be in the show notes, so if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, you can go ahead and reach out to Johnny, or you can get in touch with FEBA. Just know there are federal retirement consultants all over the country that can help you, and Johnny and his team are here to help. If you have any questions, again, reach out to us there, or reach out on the number on your screen right now to Mr. Johnny Rosier. We'll see you next time. Johnny, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the opportunity to share information.
Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time, everybody, here on the Federal Benefits Show. I'm Alex Wellings. We'll see you then.